What's up, everybody? Dan here with Dan and Sarah Makers, and we are coming back at you with another Tool Tuesday. In today's Tool Tuesday, we are going to look at actually quite a few different tools, but they all do one type of job, and that is to cut sheet metal. Now, sheet metal, it can be a little daunting to some people. They look at a big pole barn or just another structure with a lot of different types of sheet metal on it, and they're like, I have no idea how I do that. Or maybe you're at a knick-knack store and you see the cut-up license plates, or just some arts and crafts thing that requires a little bit of sheet metal on it. So there's a whole wide range of people that may or may not want to attempt to cut sheet metal. There are a lot of different tools out there, as you can see, but they're roughly grouped into just a few general categories. There are some really specialty tools out there which I don't have, but we can talk about those pretty quick. So I'll get some of the tools that I don't recommend for cutting sheet metal out of the way first. A hacksaw. It will work. You have to have a fine enough tooth blade on it to actually cut the sheet metal, but it's going to be very laborious. You're limited by how deep you can cut based on a hacksaw frame like this, or you're cutting with just the tip of this, so you can keep cutting down a sheet or across a sheet or a piece of metal or something like that. So it just gets really frustrating. It's really exhausting, and you're not going to get a nice, smooth, clean cut. It's not going to be straight. It's not going to be nice edges or anything like that. So as far as a hacksaw, I wouldn't highly recommend hacksaws for cutting sheet metal. You can go the power option, and you can use a sawzall, and you can throw a metal cutting blade in the sawzall. There are probably hundreds of them out there, different styles, varieties, things like that. But again, you want a really, really fine-tooth blade to maximize the number of teeth in the sheet metal. And when you're looking at 28, 26, 29 gauge sheet metal, whatever it is you're looking at, even small teeth, 18 teeth per inch, that might be too many teeth or too few teeth that are actually going to be in the metal. So again, it's going to be a very violent, jiggly, shaky situation as you try and cut that sheet metal. You're not going to have a smooth cut. It's going to be frustrating, and you're not going to be happy with the final result. Grinders. Angle grinders. That's a big one that a lot of people like. They're fast. When they're cutting sheet metal, it's extremely noisy. You get a lot of sparks. Those sparks can pit glass, whether it's automotive glass or building glass. All those little fragments of metal shavings and dust that go everywhere. If you're, say, cutting on a patio or a sidewalk or something like that, you don't get them all cleaned up, and then it rains, you're going to have rust spots all over the place. I've seen that way too many times. Aluminum sills by windows, just, it makes a big mess. And again, you're not going to get a super clean cut. They have abrasive blades. They have flat discs. They have offset discs. They have ones where you have to have the little nut on your grinder and the blade wrench to change out the discs. And they also have the ones that are threaded, which don't require that nut and that blade clamp. If you're working with people that don't purchase their own tools and don't really care about the tools that they're given, that little nut in the blade wrench will get lost extremely fast. So it might be worth investing in the more expensive type of disc with the actual threaded arbor built into it. Or else you're going to have a lot of angle grinders that won't work. There are newer types of discs now. A couple companies have come out with them, and it's basically an all-metal disc with an abrasive bonded to the edge. They're supposed to last a lot longer, and they do. One of the nice things about these metal discs is they don't get smaller with time as you use them. These standard abrasives, they get much smaller, much faster, and when you were cutting, an inch deep, all of a sudden now they're an 1/8 inch, and you're just trying to just barely grind the metal with it. So these get smaller, so that's an issue. Any type of abrasive or cutting disc, they deal with friction to cut. So it basically rubs the metal, it heats up the metal, makes it soft enough for the abrasive to cut. It's going to leave rollovers, it's going to leave a sharp, jagged edge, and it's going to possibly bake the paint off in the immediate area to where you're cutting, which can cause a problem with rust and corrosion and things like that in the future. Way back when I first got into construction, we used these carborundum or abrasive discs. Again, they get smaller. These fit on a circular saw, 7¼ inch circular saw, but they're 7-inch disc. As you can see, with just a little bit of use, they get much smaller. They also have a tendency to explode or break apart violently if they get dropped, stepped on, bent, cracked, something like that. So that was one of the risks that you had with that. Then they also came out with this. It looks a little bit like a concrete cutting disc, but it again is a friction abrasive disc. Solid steel, so it doesn't get smaller relative to an abrasive disc. And these things are just nightmarishly loud. They're horribly loud, so I would avoid those. So as far as the power options, not a big fan of those, honestly, for cutting sheet metal. I've done big buildings where we had to cut every single panel, and we cut literally probably several thousand feet of delta rib, those 3-foot wide panels, top and bottom of every single one with hand shears. So they work, you get good at it, and it goes. As far as cutting sheet metal, we have a couple power and manual options that do the same thing. We have what are called double cuts, which are basically, it's a shear. There's a power version like this, and it's got two fixed side plates and a jaw in the center that just oscillates up and down. And each time it comes up, it pushes and shears off the metal and creates this curl of metal in between the cut as you cut. There are also some manual versions, which are very tiring to use, but they do work in some situations. So the double cut shears, these are great for doing long straight runs. Not so good when you're going up and over corrugations. They get down in a corner in a valley, and it's really hard to kind of get around that edge and then go back up or down. So flat long cuts, ripping a panel to width, these are the way to go. We also have nibblers, which are, this particular one's a pneumatic one. They have electric ones. And then here is kind of a manual version. Basically, it's got a little cylinder that has a shoulder all the way around, and that's pulled up quickly. And as you're cutting, you're pushing that little cylinder in under the sheet metal, and it pulls up and shears a little, I don't know, semicircle of sheet metal off. And then it goes back down. You're pushing it constantly. It goes forward, and it keeps shearing off that little semicircle. This is similar, but this one's a square cut. This is made by Klein Tools. This, basically, you drill a small hole in the sheet metal, you insert the end, and then you just keep moving it and squeezing it, and it'll take out little square chunks. Those are good for, say, cutting around roof vents or pipes or something in the middle of a panel. It's really nice and quick. The nibbler does get down into angles a little bit better than the double cut shears, so that's nicer when you're working on a profiled metal panel. Obviously, drill bits, standard twist drill bits are okay. The thinner the sheet metal, the more tendency they have to pilot their way in when they almost have drilled all the way through, and then they tear the metal up. So if you can get something solid behind it, it'll help reduce the amount of tear off of that metal, and it basically the metal trying to thread up the drill bit. Another really common way of cutting larger holes or small holes is a hole saw. There are literally probably thousands of these out there, different styles, different diameters, different brands, different makes, all that kind of stuff. These are really good for cutting round holes, obviously. That's what they're made for. But the word of warning with these is that once you pierce that sheet metal, the pilot bit is the only thing that's holding that hole saw in place. And once all these teeth hit that sheet metal surface, they can really violently dig in and start spiraling out of control. I've had multiple pilot bits shear off or snap off because they don't like that lateral or side impact. And then you scratch up the surface of the sheet metal quite badly. So hole saws, if you've got a good substrate that you're drilling through the sheet metal and into wood decking or something like that, something that will hold it better than just a thin layer of sheet metal, you might have a better chance of success at drilling through sheet metal. Otherwise, be really careful using hole saws and sheet metal. Damaging the surface is one of those things you don't want to do. Over here we have a whole selection of hand cutters or aviation snips. There are 3 universal color code colors that indicate what type of snip it is. Yellow handles at some point indicate that it is a straight cut. It'll do limited left and right cutting. Green is going to be your right cut. That basically means that it can go straight and do right hand turns. So green would be a right hand turn. Red handles, those are straight cut and left hand turns. So you've got three main types. You've got your straight, your left, and your right cuts. There are subcategories in those where you have relatively straight, narrow blades where the actual two sides are very skinny. Then you've got offsets, which if you look at this one, this is a straight, this is the offset, and it's got a really big duckbill blade on the one side. And then also kind of the angle of attack gets your hand up out of the way with the offsets. So that's a nice one. This particular set, this is an offset here, but this is a really like 90-degree offset. So this basically allows you to cut with your hand straight up away from a surface. These are good for really tight areas, but you don't need them that often. There are a lot of different brands of snips out there. There are a lot of companies that have come to market recently. Say Craftsman, they have kind of their new style here. You have Milwaukee. This was one of their sets, left and right, offset aviation snips. These are nice, they cut well, but as soon as you squeeze them, they unlock, and it doesn't take much to unlock them. So they're constantly unlocking if you're carrying them in your nail bags or something like that. It's just a real hassle. Recently, Milwaukee has come out with a new design where they have taken care of that lock. These are brand new to me, so I haven't even opened the package yet. But let's open it up. Let's take a look at them, and we'll talk about them just a little bit here. So this particular one, they've now put the lock down here in the middle. So I like that. It's out of the way. It doesn't unlock when you squeeze it, which personally, I'm not a big fan of that auto unlock like that. I like them to stay locked until I'm ready to use them. They have this kind of tab here, which does lock and doesn't lock, depending on how used the tools are. This is an old style whisk, this is new style whisk. They've changed the lock. So obviously locks are a big thing with these tools that a lot of people have issues with. Finally, as far as hand shears go, this is a set of 5 workforce shears that I bought years ago. I think I got it from Home Depot. I think it was around $18 for all 5. Which basically you get 5 shears for the price of 1. You've got your equivalent of a yellow straight cut shear. They're all spring loaded, they unlock, kind of. I don't use these at all. I need to just get rid of them, honestly. These were worth what I paid for them, let's put it that way. They aren't color coded, so you don't quite know which ones you're getting. You have to look at them and know what you're using. The latches or locks on them break. They do not cut well. They roll the metal, especially on the edge when you're trying to cut. So that's probably the number one thing that I look for in a set of shears is how close to an edge can I cut and actually cut a very, very thin sliver off the edge versus having it roll that edge down in between the jaws as the jaws separate. So these roll metal really well. So as far as PPE, gloves are definitely something you want to have when you're cutting sheet metal. Sooner or later everyone's going to get cut, and if there's somebody that says they've worked with sheet metal and they've never gotten cut, it's like talking to somebody that's ridden a motorcycle that's never crashed. Oh no, well, I never crashed into another car, I crashed into a tree, but that's not the same thing. So anyways, I've seen a lot of slices and razor cuts with sheet metal over the years. If you're using hand tools, you do run the risk of having little pieces of metal clip off and fly off into your eye potentially. So eyeglasses, safety glasses are a good idea also. So yeah, that about does it for me for Tool Tuesday. There are a lot of different options out there. You get what you pay for typically, but sometimes the really fancy power tool options aren't necessarily the best for every situation. 90% of the sheet metal cutting I do is with this hand snips here. They have some big panel shears where you put your delta rib panels in and you get a big lever and you cut it and it cuts the whole sheet in one big cut. But a vast number of people are never going to have a need for that. And even a company that I worked for where we did a lot of steel buildings with steel siding, we never actually brought it out of the shop because it was too much of a hassle to set up and get lined up and have panels that you can slide in nice and straight. It's not a real easy one-person deal. So, yeah, invest in a good pair of hand snips. If they're rolling the metal, they're not good. If they cut a really thin sliver on the edge, they're good. So hopefully this kind of gave you a little bit of an introduction to sheet metal cutting tools and gives you some direction on what you might want to invest in if you've got to cut sheet metal. So follow us on Instagram, Dan and Sarah Makers, and be sure to like, subscribe, comment, thumbs up these videos. We really like that. Enjoy seeing that. So until next time, this is Dan. We hope this gets you motivated to get out there and do something. Have a good one. Bye.